Ladies and gentlemen, my biggest fear of the US stock market is gone because of something Donald Trump has done, and now is getting public recognition that it will kill my biggest fear. What is that? What's the implication? Let's watch on till the end. So my biggest fear of the US stock market all the years has been the debt bubble, and it's blowing just bigger and bigger and bigger. And in my planning scenario, this debt bubble is really something that will eventually explode and cause a catastrophic outcome throughout not just US and the rest of the world. What we don't know is when the bubble will burst. But Donald Trump has done a series of things that has reversed the situation. And today I will cover how the tariff and the budget reforms that is happening right now might reshape the US stock market worst case scenario. As usual, these are my disclaimers. This content is for education and entertainment and not for financial advice. Let's go. So throughout the recent years, we've all known that the US debt bubble is growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And time again, many economists, news agency, media will come up with news such as this and say that the American debt bubble is going to explode one day, is getting out of hand. And even Jerome Powell say that the fiscal direction of the US debt is unsustainable, meaning that one day it will explode. What we don't know is when, but surely it will explode. And in my own family planning scenario between me and my son, is that one day we have to throw all our US assets into the dustbin and quickly move it out, because this US debt bubble one day will explode. What we just don't know is when. And it's always been my biggest fear, but guess what? The biggest fear is now over. So the Congressional Budget Office of US has just predicted that the Trump tariffs could reduce the budget deficit by a whopping $4 trillion over the next one decade. And this is a very, very big announcement by them. Just to give everybody a flavor of how bad the fiscal situation is. So in short, when we talk about budget deficit, it's very simple to understand. It simply means that US is spending more money than is making more money. So in a company setting, the company is running to losses. That's called a profit and losses. But in a government setting, that's not called a loss, that's called a deficit. So the US has been facing an unprecedented fiscal challenge because every year the deficit has been increasing to some insane level. So last year, the deficit has blown to $1.8 trillion in 1 year. And the interest payment is reaching 1 trillion annually by 2025. And it's about 6.4% of GDP. That's frightening. Now, just to give you a feel, the Singapore government spends about 5% of GDP on the entire Singapore Armed Forces. That means the debt itself in US, if you translate the Singapore case, we can support more than the entire SAF. That's a very big number. And as a result, the debt is going so high, many credit agencies have downgraded the US credit rating, and there's a lot of investor confidence now shaken in the US Treasury market. And this is something that is totally unsustainable, but most presidents just ignore it. Donald Trump is different. Now, a lot of people don't like Donald Trump for many reasons. I understand, okay? I also don't like him for some of his mannerism and things like that. But what he has done is something that is really very good to deal with this problem. So what did he do? Well, he started off setting up the Department of Government Efficiency called DOGE. It was initially led by Elon Musk, and then they fall out. It doesn't matter. But what they have already done is to massively cut federal staffing, a lot of contracts, a lot of funding, government spending, all this were cut. And this resulted in a very, very big budget saving for the US government. And I'll talk about that later. Now, that is a small to medium-sized savings. On the other hand, okay, what he has done was to expand the tariff policy, initially targeting only at China and then to Canada Mexico, and suddenly he cut it across the entire world and sent everybody into a shockwave. Every single country, probably with the exception of China so far, all bow down to him and say, I pay or I accept. So, and this will certainly cause a very huge inflow, okay, of budget revenue into the US government. So combining these two together, you cut the cost, you increase the revenue, huge budget savings. So just to be clear, the US have imposed a significant increase in the tariff towards almost the whole world. And as a result, countries right now that are exporting into US, they have to pay tariffs or pass on the cost into local importers. But certainly you can't avoid all this, regardless of whether is it paid by the exporters or paid by the importers or paid by the consumer. The US government benefits, okay? And they increase a significant amount of budget. And that's something that we have to come to terms with, that is that these tariffs is working, especially in reducing budget deficit. The Congressional Budget Office is an entity in US that projects some of these financial projections. And initially, they were quite skeptical about Trump's budget estimates and things like that. But they have revised their projections for the next 10 years. And this is the latest. So right now, the Congressional Budget Office project that the tariffs could reduce the budget deficit by $4 trillion, okay, over 10 years. And $3.3 trillion will come from direct tariff revenue. And any countries that want to deal with US will have to pay. Now, a lot of people will just say, well, they can just don't trade with US. But US is the biggest market in the world. They cannot escape it. So you want to deal with it, you got to pay, okay? It doesn't matter who pays for it, the US government will receive it. So the other one that is that they estimate is there could be a $0.7 trillion lowering of interest rate costs due to reduced debt in issuance. Now, that has not taken account of potentially lower interest as well. I think the savings could be more. But this is something that right now we're looking at $4 trillion. And Scott Bessent, the US Treasury Secretary, actually have a bold vision. He thinks that the tariff revenue could exceed $500 billion per year. Now, if it's $500 billion per year, times 10 years would be $5 trillion. But he actually said this, watch my words, potentially approaching 1 trillion annually in extreme scenario. 1 trillion. If it's 1 trillion, it will be $10 trillion. If it's $10 trillion, I think we will really have a very different scenario in US. So right now, the baseline projection is $500 billion, potentially on the upside going to $1 trillion a year, and 10 years could be anything between $4 trillion to $10 trillion in budget reduction. That's amazing, man. So in short, with this kind of numbers coming in years to come, I think our debt crisis is over. Let's not forget the good work that was previously done by DOGE, that previously led by Elon Musk. Okay, the DOGE launched an unprecedented attack on the US government inefficiency. It has aggressively cut a lot of staff and redundant position, consolidate department, and a lot of people were criticizing, wow, these cuts will destroy US whatsoever. So far, nothing, right? Now, a lot of countries outside US are feeling the brunt of it. Charity organization, research organization, they suddenly have a cut off. They suddenly have a cut of all this budget. But these are nothing to do with US. Why does the US have to pay for them? That's the thinking of Trump and Elon Musk. And they also force a lot of contractors to renegotiate those contracts and reduce costs and totally close down some programs and departments. And that really led to some big numbers. Now, what is the exact number? That has a lot of controversy. Elon Musk's previous estimates was around $180 billion a year. Independent estimate would reduce that to about $130 billion a year, and so on. So really what the number is, it doesn't matter. It is a massive number. And that really make the US government wake up and know that, if they continue to spend uncontrollably, they may come under the fire of the Trump administration. Combine all these savings together, we're looking at $4 trillion. And how is it made up of? First of all, is $3.3 trillion in direct tariff revenue increase. There's potentially interest saving of about 0.7 trillion and DOGE cut of about 0.16, 0.13. It doesn't matter what the number is. It's all around the ballpark, potentially $4 trillion. And these are real numbers. Okay, never mind who's paying for it. Never mind what's the social impact. Never mind what's the inflationary impact whatsoever. $4 trillion savings, and that took away my worst case scenario in the US stock market. So how does this affect the US stock market and the financial market? So let's see the Wall Street reaction, right? The projected $4 trillion reduction has already significant positive impact on financial market. Now, the credit rating agencies, although have reduced the AAA to AA+, but now the outlook looks positive. The bond vigilantes back out of those aggressive treasury shorting. So the bonds no longer come under attack, and potentially some upside as well, and potentially lowering borrowing costs for US government, and long-term yields will go down. By the way, this could help bond prices go up and renew foreign interest in US debt instrument. If all this was to happen, good days are ahead. Most importantly, these take away the worst case scenario that can happen to the US financial market. And if the debt bubble would have grown unprecedentedly bigger and bigger, and one day it bursts, I think the outcome will be worse than the 2008 financial crisis. And what's the impact to the US dollar? Well, there could be potentially some short-term inflation, and I think more or less this has been built into the predictions. But I think in the medium to long term, it will provide some stability to the US dollar. And the fear of the worthlessness of the US dollar goes down and down and down. I think the US dollar is now regaining back some confidence. It was some stability and over the long run. Now, in the short run and short term, there could be up and down. But I think in the long run, the US dollar will become stable again and retain its reign as the world leading currency. And those people who think that the Chinese yuan will replace the US dollar as the world's leading currency got to get their head checked out. On the other hand, let's not forget that there could be some risk as well, right? Number one is the tariffs may cause some inflation, and it may cause unexpected fear and drive out inflation in a bigger way. I think the risk is less right now. The DOGE savings may not turn out to be that much because the American government just used to spending a lot of money. What they save is like playing whack-a-mole, right? You hit this side and another thing come out. You hit this side and another thing come out. That could happen. And global trade tension right now could reduce overall economic growth. And as a result, the amount of revenue coming into the US coffers will be less. And there's always a fear that between China and US, the negotiation won't turn out well. And then there's retaliation and sparked off another trade war, hard to say. And maybe the $4 trillion projection could be overly optimistic. And certainly Scott Bessent's projection up to $1 trillion savings a year could be overly optimistic as well. It is hard to say. And don't forget, the Trump administration will only last for 4 years, and 3.5 years from now, the next government who take over may be irresponsible and start spending money again, right? We don't know all this, but if we just project it on what I call ceteris paribus, it's an economic term which basically means things projected as usual, then all things remaining equal, I think this is all good news for the US financial market. So what is the bullish case for the overall US market? Number one is that there's now fiscal stability. The tariffs and the deficit reduction will improve US fiscal trajectory, leading to potentially upgrade in credit rating agency. The bonds market confidence will be restored, and US Treasuries may improve. It's not just its price, but standing as well. And there could be lowering of borrowing costs. And by the way, we think that in September, there's going to be a lowering of interest rate as well. And that could all save some borrowing costs for the US government. And finally, the US dollar dominance will be retained, and the US economic strength is just going from strength to strength. So in short, if we look at the big picture, now the big debt bubble is now deflating. It need not go to zero. Very few countries in the world has zero debt. What we don't want is to let the debt bubble grow bigger and bigger. The analogy is this. There's no need to bring down HDB prices and property prices. It has gone up. But what we don't want is for it to go up out of control, right? So the similarity with this and the analogy is the US debt bubble, if we can stop it from growing or at least grow at the small sustainable rate, that's enough. And that's enough to remove the worst case scenario that can happen for the US financial market. And this we have to give credit to the unlikable but formidable President Donald Trump. So in conclusion, this is a historical shift, a watershed moment that we need to come to terms with, that the projection right now for the fiscal trajectory looks very optimistic. And like a sick patient that's down with cancer, a powerful doctor with powerful medicine and healing skills have finally put the cancer into remission. And this is what I think US fiscal policy has done, and I think good days are just ahead. Now, will the US stock market will just be going up non-stop? Of course not. There'll be in between other kinds of shock that will shock the US market. But as far as the biggest worst case scenario can happen, I think it's over. Would you agree with me? I would like to hear your comments, okay? And maybe we can discuss this tonight in a live stream. Thank you. And tonight I'll have a big announcement to make. I'll see you tonight. Bye-bye.